Hello, everybody. I'm here to do your week 5 lecture about chapter 5, Dimensions of Diversity. I'm going to zoom through some of this because there's some of it that I think is pretty self-explanatory and some of it that I really want to spend a little bit of time discussing with myself, but really with you. So let's get rolling. All right. Okay, so let's start here. So social groups, I think this is pretty, self-explanatory. It's a group of people who share common characteristics. So, if you share like 0 characteristics with someone, you're not going to be part of the same social group. But, they overlap and everything. So, you could share a bunch of physical characteristics, but not share any cultural characteristics, that sort of thing. With a particular person, or you can share a bunch of them or whatever, it's just basically a very large, very messy Venn diagram. Okay, so the concept that they're trying to explain about the social construction of differences is that difference between human beings is a it's a social construct, right? So it's something that we think about. It's not something that is inherent. It's not something that is kind of like in our genetics or anything like that. It is a social concept. So it can be changed, right? As with any social construct, it can be changed. So the thing that I want to highlight on this slide is that perceptions of your own and other social groups being accepted by the larger society is key to this. So that basically what that means is, larger society makes decisions about social groups. And you can see where there might be some problems with that, right? Is that, if the dominant society is making decisions about, minority groups, then you've got some issues already appearing at that point. Okay, so diversity in the United States. What I really want to highlight on these next few slides is that diversity in the United States is a little bit of a unique animal. And the reason why is because it is happening really, really fast. So if you look at other countries in the world, they may or may not be changing in terms of, racial makeup, ethnic makeup, but things are changing in the United States very, very fast. This has a lot to do with, historical immigration policy over the last, 70-ish years or so. Like if you think about it, 60 years ago, the population was 84% white. That's crazy, right? So like in less than 30 years, less than half of the population will be white. Well, listen, the problem with that is that the dominant culture is white culture. That's a problem when your population is now going to be less than half white. So it's not necessarily the change itself that is the problem, it's the speed, right? So it's not a problem that the demographics are changing. It's that they're changing at such a rapid pace that the society is having a hard time keeping up. Like when things change that fast, you inevitably leave some people with some views behind, and it takes a little bit of time for them to catch up. Okay, so likewise with race, age is also changing very quickly. Our life expectancy is getting longer and longer and longer. So very shortly here, in 45 years, it's estimated that 26% of the population will be 65 or older. Right now, it's only 17%. That is a big change. So this presents a number of issues, like if we talk about Social Security, like that's a big issue, right? But not the only one. There's all sorts of systems in place around older people. And, elder protection, elder services, you know, medical services, medical social work, hospice social work, which is something that I do, like all these services that revolve around older folks, you know, are going to have to expand and expand and expand. So if you're looking for an expanding field within the expanding field of social work, gerontology is a good place to head. All right, so your book does a terrible job of this. There is a whole lot more to the non-straight, non-cisgender population than LGBT. I really dislike how they manage this in your book. So I really encourage you to do some of your own reading and research about this. And like, you know, if this is an area of social work that you're interested in going into, we are certainly in the right place for that. You know, San Francisco, as I'm sure that you know, is at the forefront of this type of non-cisgender, non-straight population. And it's really a really cool area to work in. It's great to be at the cutting edge of any field. All right, so physical disability. This is another thing that I'm not loving how your book is handling it and how the publisher has handled this this PowerPoint. But the thing that I want to say about this is that as folks live longer, we're also going to have more services around physical disability because, you know, as you get older, doesn't necessarily mean that you get there unscathed. So this is also going to be a field that expands. And also, I just want to underline, remember when we talked about person first language? I think that was in chapter 1, and using the language that the person with the lived experience is choosing. I just want to underline that again, because it is really super double, triple, quadruple important that we do that with all populations, including folks with physical disabilities. Okay, so I talked about this just very, very briefly a little bit earlier, but like basically the makeup of the United States is very, very unique because of all of these factors. So, you know, we have a very physically large country. It has a lot of ground space. And, you know, we also have a bunch of territories and all of that. Plus, you know, for a very large part of our country's history, we really emphasized immigration and encouraged immigration. And, you know, the policies didn't always quite match the philosophy, but the philosophy was about, you know, like, you know, give me your poor and your sick, you know, the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. So, you know, it's a bit of a shift now that we're entering a phase in the country where that's less welcome, but nevertheless, these shifts take a long time to show up. And so all of these things have come in to create a very unique cultural makeup of our country. Okay, so the implications for social work practice are many. You know, we have a huge number of discrete social groups, and there is kind of varying levels of assimilation and integration with, you know, American society, whatever that is. And, you know, like we have to be aware of all of this, and like many multiple cultural groups all coming together in one place. Again, if you look at the world as a whole, we are almost unique in that sense, to the degree to which that we do that here in this country. So it's worth being aware of that. You know, if you go to the Netherlands, you are going to see very few people that do not look like they're Dutch, right? So anyway, there's a number of barriers to service. You know, they put this very mildly here on the slide, but, you know, folks in minority groups have often had very suspect experiences with government systems or with large systems in general. And so that has led to a lot of underutilization of all sorts of services, not just mental health services, certainly mental health services, but not just those. You know, if you think about what happened in Tuskegee, and if you don't know, you should Google that, Google Tuskegee and syphilis, and you will be horrified. That sort of thing peppers our entire history. You know, the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is a fantastic book along the same lines, and helps kind of understand why some groups have some very legitimate suspicions. Okay, so this is the thing that I was rushing through so that we could get to. I really want to talk about this. So cultural competency, that is a very, 15-year-old term. We don't, as modern social workers, want to try for cultural competency. Why is that? So as defined in your book, cultural competency in social work practice is the worker's ability to understand individuals and families of different cultures and to use that understanding as a basis for intervention and practice. Yikes, right? So listen, you're unlikely to even understand your own cultural context. You are very, very unlikely to ever really be able to have a competency in anybody else's cultural context. So I think that cultural competency is a bit of a myth, and it's not the thing that we should be aiming for. So let's move on. Talk about what we should be aiming for. Oh, wait, sorry. Before we move on and talk about what we should be aiming for, the other thing about this is that we are emphasizing multiculturalism as the ideology should recognize and include equally all different cultures. Okay, so this is good in the sense that it does counter ethnocentrism, but remember that this isn't possible in the real world. Okay, so like absolutely it's a thing that we should strive for, unlike cultural competency, which we should not strive for. And we're going to talk about how humility up here, yeah, replaces cultural competency. But multiculturalism, though it is something that you are never going to achieve, absolutely is something that you should strive for. All right, this is really what I want to talk about. So cultural humility. Listen, so you have 2 videos this week that you're supposed to be watching on cultural humility. One of them is a 30-minute long documentary, so stick with it. But basically, the whole idea behind cultural humility is that we are all unique, cultures are unique, and we understand ourselves best. What does that look like in social work terms? So in social work terms, it basically means you are the expert in yourself. You are the expert in your family. You are the expert in your culture. You are the expert, not the worker, right? So we as workers can't go into situations and be like, well, I know what's going on and you don't know what's going on because I did all this school and you didn't. That is an extremely unhelpful and yet very common way to see it. You should avoid that at all costs. Remember, the person that you're talking to is the expert in their own life, and that includes their culture, right? So you, in order to be an effective practitioner, you really have to go into every situation with an open mind, be curious, be willing to kind of look at all aspects of the situation from a perspective that is not your own. Try to drop your own preconceived notions about how things should be. Are you going to be able to do that? No, not fully. But if you think about emphasizing it in your own mind, you'll have a much more open mind towards other folks' situations than you would otherwise. Okay. So the thing that I made bold here is that you can't be culturally competent in any culture that isn't yours, and even in your own, you're not going to be fully competent because you don't every family has a different culture. Every relationship, every dyad has a culture, right? So you're not going to be culturally competent and in pretty much any situation that you're in. So that's why I really, really dislike that term. But what you can be is humble, because what humble is curious. All right. So, they really insist on covering this term in a level of detail that kind of makes me cranky in your book. But it's important to understand that, like, a lot of the folks that you are going to encounter, the older generation of social workers, all of this stuff are going to be coming at it from this perspective. Even though it's an older perspective, it really has some major flaws. This is the way that they're coming at it. So just kind of be aware. All right. So awareness of self, you can think about that as cultural competence for yourself, which you can achieve. It's something that you really need to understand how you think about the world, how you move through the world, how you exist in the world and with relation to other people, and what your values are. If you don't, you're really going to do damage to those around you, because you're going to be putting these unconscious beliefs and expectations on other people when you have no right to do that. All right, and here's a few more that didn't fit on that last slide. Okay, so the stages of cultural understanding. I tried to find a good video on this and I just didn't. But these are defined in your book, and I would be very surprised indeed if they did not pop up on your exam. So, kind of understand what they are, at least where they are in your book, so that you can look them up if they do. And this is a kind of a useful framework for kind of understanding what can go wrong. Again, cultural proficiency, I don't know about all that, right? Cultural competence, I don't know about all that. But we can certainly get past the first few stages of this, right? We do not have to go around destroying other people's cultures. We don't have to go around being completely oblivious to the cultures around us. We can be involved. We can be curious. We can ask questions in an appropriate and respectful way. And hopefully, in this class and in the classes to follow, you'll learn how to do that. But we do not have to go through the world either expecting that we're going to be able to learn everything about somebody else's culture, or just being like, well, never mind, it doesn't matter, and then just kind of blindly crashing your way through interactions with folks and then causing harm. All right, so you have quite a lot of work to do this week. Like I said, you have a couple of videos to watch. You also have your exam to work on. That's due at the end of next week. Also due at the end of next week is your note-taking assignment for the 99% Invisible podcast. And there's like 6 parts to it. Do not wait. You are going to be in for a world of suffering if you wait until the day before it's due. So make sure that you give it the appropriate space and time. Read through the assignment just to know how much time you need to give it. And let me know if you have any questions. I will be more than happy to help you. All right, thanks so much. Bye-bye.